In 1975, Peter Singer released Animal Liberation, which is widely considered the founding philosophical statement of the modern animal rights movement. According to Ingrid Newkirk, the founder of PETA, this book forever changed the conversation about our treatment of animals. It made people, myself included, change what we ate, what we wore, and how we perceived animals. My name is Natalie, and I've been an animal rights advocate for 4 years. Although I've read dozens of books on the topic of animal rights, before this review, I hadn't read Animal Liberation. It's not that I hadn't tried. I did purchase the audiobook a couple years ago, but listening to the animal testing chapter was just too much for me. There's also a negative perception of Peter Singer within the vegan movement. While plenty of activists have recommended Gary Francione or Tom Reagan, whenever Peter Singer comes up, I hear how he's not really vegan or a welfarist or a problematic utilitarian. But I wanted to find out for myself, so I finally read the updated version of his classic, Animal Liberation Now. And today I'm gonna break it down, share the most interesting parts, and discuss whether or not I think the vegan movement's criticism of Peter Singer is warranted. If you're watching this channel, you're probably already familiar with many of the ideas in Animal Liberation. The basic premise is that we should include animals into our circle of moral concern for the same reasons we included women, gay people, and other marginalized groups. Animals deserve rights not because they're equal to humans, but because they also have interests, and we should take their interests into account. Singer calls this the equal consideration of interests. And it doesn't mean we should treat chickens like humans, because a chicken doesn't need voting rights, but it does mean they shouldn't be trapped in cages too small to spread their wings. Singer goes into the research surrounding animal sentience, which proves that animals, including fish, have awareness and can feel pain. He lays out the logical argument of marginal cases, which claims that if it's wrong to hurt a human with the mental capacities of an animal, then it's also wrong to hurt animals. What matters isn't the capabilities of the individual, but the suffering they experience. I love that the book starts with a strong logical case for animal rights, because people often paint vegans as overly emotional and irrational, saying that we just don't want to acknowledge the suffering in the world, or that we're naive for trying to fight against the system that we're born into. But Singer makes it easy to see that the scientific evidence on animal sentience compels us to take their suffering into account. He doesn't frame it as, if you love animals, you shouldn't exploit them. He boldly states that what humans do to animals is a moral atrocity that we should oppose. While there are many industries that perpetuate animal exploitation today, Singer focuses on animal testing and factory farming because he says that they cause the most suffering to the most individuals. Reading the animal testing chapter, I understand why I abandoned this book in the first place. I won't cover all the terrible experiments in here, but do want to highlight a couple. One common area of animal testing is called the LD50, or the lethal dose 50% test, where they force animals to ingest substances and determine that the LD50 is the amount of toxin at which half the animals die. Since animals are good at detecting poison, they don't want to consume these substances, but researchers force them down their throats with tubes, like they do with food in the foie gras industry. And if animals are suffering from the substances, they can't euthanize them because that would ruin the test, which is to find out what dose will kill them. These tests aren't even useful for humans because what kills us might not kill them. One drug called Oriflex was touted as a wonder drug for arthritis because it passed all the usual animal tests. But when it was released in 1980, it killed almost 100 humans and injured 3,500 more. If penicillin had been judged by its toxicity on guinea pigs, it might never have been used on humans. Another popular area of animal research is on addiction, where researchers force animals to ingest alcohol, cocaine, or barbiturates, and then deprive them of these substances to study withdrawal symptoms. One experiment even forced elephants to take high amounts of LSD, which caused a female elephant to fall down and tremble for an hour, barely able to breathe. Look, I'm all for experimenting with drugs, but it has to be consensual. I remember when I first went vegan, I learned about factory farms, but knew nothing about animal testing. I ran into an acquaintance and he mentioned he'd just gotten a job at a primate research lab nearby. But he didn't sound excited about it. He seemed ashamed. I remember thinking it was weird, and when I went home later to look up the lab, I understood why he had that reaction. Singer asks how otherwise good people, like my acquaintance, can participate in these evil experiments on animals, and concludes that the answer lies in unquestioned speciesism. When you believe that hurting animals is for the greater good of humans, and you're getting money and prestige for your experiments, it's easy to reassure yourself that it has to be done. Singer ends the chapter with a discussion on if animal testing should ever be permitted, and he comes at it from a non-speciesist perspective by saying that if it really were possible to prevent harm to many by inflicting suffering on one individual, human or animal, then it would be the right thing to do. I think that's one of the utilitarian views with which many vegans disagree, because a lot of vegans come from a rights-based, deontological perspective, which says that you should never violate someone's rights, even if it's for the greater good. Singer also says that animal activists shouldn't advocate for the complete abolition of animal testing, and I see how vegans would disagree with that. But the reason he says that is because there's been greater progress to stop vivisection when advocates push for ethics committees or requiring scientists to look at alternatives to animal testing. Historically, when activists have taken an all-or-nothing approach to vivisection, we haven't won voters over or helped any animals. But labs aren't the only place humans torture animals. Let's get into the next chapter, down on the factory farm. This section is a response to the false belief that farmers care about their animals because if they didn't, the animals wouldn't be profitable. Singer highlights the many ways animal welfare conflicts with profit and argues that animal welfare only counts when, if it got worse, it would reduce profits. He gets all the information in this chapter from industry sources like trade journals, magazines, and websites, which I appreciate because people can't discount it as vegan propaganda. Considering I've been researching factory farms for years, I was surprised by how much I learned in this chapter. I learned that the word meat originally meant any solid food, but evolved to mean flesh around the 14th century. So next time someone tells you Beyond Meat isn't meat, tell them that they need to brush up on their medieval English. One of the worst things I learned was about how the industry starves animals used for breeding. You probably know that chickens are bred to grow so large so quickly that they can't stand up and their organs fail, but you might not have thought about how this affects their parents. These chickens are bred to have huge appetites so they'll eat enough to gain weight, but if their parents were allowed to eat as much as they wanted, they would grow too large to breed. To solve this problem, the meat industry didn't question the ethics surrounding fast-growing breeds. They decided to restrict the parents' food so they could keep their fast-growing genes without ruining the bird's ability to procreate. They give them 60 to 80% less food than they would eat if it were available, using the skip-a-day feeding schedule, which means they only feed them every other day. This makes the birds so hungry that they spend 25% of their time pecking at empty feeders. They also resort to eating their own litter and becoming aggressive toward other chickens. The pork industry does the same with breeding sows, typically only feeding them the bare minimum to keep them alive and pregnant, which is about 60% of what they need to feel full. That's like only giving 1,200 calories a day to someone who needs 2,000. Whenever meat eaters say that we should keep killing animals, otherwise they wouldn't exist, tell them about the animals used for breeding and ask if they'd want to be kept constantly starved and pregnant just so their children are more profitable at grocery stores. There was one weird part in this chapter where Singer highlights an ethical dairy farm in Australia that's apparently run by a passionate animal rights advocate who doesn't separate the calves from their mothers. They use sexed semen to make sure only females are born, who then become part of the dairy herd. I think calling this ethical is a stretch, and I couldn't find any information on what happens to the cows when their milk production declines. While the farm brags that they don't kill calves, they don't specifically state that they don't kill cows. Also, how do you ethically artificially inseminate a cow when you don't need to? How Now Farm also reinforces the idea that animals are resources for us to use, an idea that Singer actually pushes back on in the next section after this one, by saying that we shouldn't use the word cattle because it means property. I've seen a lot of critique online about Singer's views, with people claiming that he doesn't think it's wrong to kill animals for food as long as they don't suffer. But that's not what he writes in this book. He discusses the idea of conscientious omnivores who believe that it's better to bring an animal into the world to eat them as long as they have a good life than for them not to exist at all. Singer advocates that we should avoid killing animals for food except when it's necessary for our health or survival, even if it means that fewer animals will come into existence to have short but good lives. Not only for the animals, but also because of animal farming's negative impact on our planet. A common critique is that Singer is a welfarist and he doesn't want animals out of cages, he just wants bigger cages. Again, that's not what he says in this book. He supports welfare reforms with the hope that they'll eventually lead to animal liberation, not as an end goal. One issue I have with philosophy books in general is that they're interesting to think about, but they don't provide practical advice for how to live your life. That's why I've always been drawn to Stoicism, because it provides a framework for building character and living a virtuous life. However, animal liberation isn't just a set of ideas to consider. It's a practical guide for how we can reject speciesism in a society built on the exploitation of animals. Singer encourages readers not only to eat ethically, but to donate money to animal charities and speak up about animal rights. He even includes recipes at the end. I will say they don't sound very good. Austrian pea soup, goulash, borscht, and tofu kelp soup. Really, Peter? Where's the cashew queso and tofu scramble? If you ever update this book again, check out some vegan YouTube recipes, because none of these are appetizing. One of the highlights in this book for me was when he shares the story of why he went vegetarian. He went to lunch with a vegetarian friend, and when Singer asked why he didn't eat meat, his friend told him what was happening to animals on farms and slaughterhouses, and forever changed the course of Singer's life. To me, that story shows how powerful talking about animal rights can be. Most people you speak to aren't going to go vegan, but sometimes they will. And sometimes they'll dedicate their lives to animal advocacy. I remember once when I was doing outreach at a college campus, a girl walked by holding a bag of Chick-fil-A, and I asked if she wanted to chat about it. After that conversation, not only did she go vegan, but now she's an organizer for an animal rights group on campus. While most people aren't ready for the vegan message, some people are, and we should seek them out and change their minds. Animal liberation exposed millions of people to the philosophy of animal rights, and that's amazing, even if it's not perfect. The biggest criticism Singer gets from vegans is that he's not a vegan himself. While he doesn't discuss his animal product consumption in this book, in interviews he shares that he's happy to eat vegetarian food while traveling and doesn't mind consuming free-range eggs. Singer argues that it's better to make veganism look easier and more flexible because it increases the odds someone will adopt the lifestyle themselves. Obviously, I disagree. I think he should commit to being fully vegan because there's power in refusing to consume any animal products. If I refuse cake at a birthday party because it's made with eggs, that sends a clear message that eggs are immoral and treats animal rights like the serious social justice movement that it is. That being said, as a whole, I think this is an excellent read. I especially loved the exploration of speciesism throughout history, and there are some banger quotes. If you want book recommendations from me every 2 weeks, make sure to subscribe to my Substack. Thanks for watching, give this video a like, and let me know if you want more video book reviews. If you want to support my work, join my Patreon or donate to Pro Animal Future. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.